Welcome to another episode of the Woman Being Podcast. Today we are going to be talking about the foster care system and all the benefits, challenges, wins with the beautiful Chloe Lynch.
Hey.
So here we go.
Welcome to the Woman Being Podcast community,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine. Chloe, welcome. We're so excited to have you here today with us, and we're so excited to learn about this big, vast thing called the foster care system. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Okay, so my name is Chloe Lynch. I currently work for a nonprofit called Court Appointed Special Advocates. We call it CASA for short. That's what it's kind of known as. My title is a volunteer coordinator. So what we do is we recruit and train volunteers to work one-on-one with kids in the foster care system. So I am overseeing a group of our volunteers. I also do things like we do continuing ed, that they have to stay up on different news articles and things just pertaining to the foster care system. I help put on fundraisers, and I'm just kind of program support for my supervisor and the program manager.
That's awesome. So what drew you to this field? It's beautiful and amazing, but there's a lot of hard things probably about what you do. What made you decide you wanted to be involved?
I don't think I actually decided. I feel like it's just kind of something that happened to me. But it's also something that I love. Growing up, I lived about 5 minutes away from my grandma who did foster care. So for a lot of my life, I kind of saw that side of things. It was something that I was very familiar with. And then after high school, I started nannying for a family that was doing foster care. So they had a baby that I nannied, and then throughout the year, we would get she would call me the morning of and be like, hey, by the way, there's 3 more kids here. And I'd be like, great. So it's definitely something that I have been exposed to throughout my life. When I went back to finish my bachelor's degree, I focused on foster care for one of my papers, and specifically kids aging out of the foster care system. So after graduating and looking around for jobs, I knew I wanted to help people. Kids are really important to me, and when I was looking for jobs, it just kind of opened up, and I knew that it was something that I wanted to be a part of, and something that I want to continue being a part of, whether it's my profession or just what I choose to do with my life. So yeah, just kind of throughout my life, things have just unfolded to this kind of being an open opportunity for me.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So we hear there's a lot of narratives, I feel like, around the foster care system. You hear good things about it, you hear bad things about it. So could you tell us maybe a little bit more about the complicated nature of this system and sort of what your experience has been with it?
Yeah, so the foster care system, I feel like I hear a lot from people like, the foster care system is broken, we need to fix it. And from my experience, it's actually not broken. It's working the way that it was made to work. It was never really supposed to be a replacement for a family. It was supposed to be an emergency situation where a parent is unable to take care for their child for one reason or another. We come in, we assist, we help rehabilitate, and hopefully the goal is the child goes back. And that's like the number one most said line in my field of work is reunification. We want the child to be back with their parents. So when I hear that it's a broken system, I'm like, yes, but no, because it's really, it's not broken. It's just being used for something that it was never really intended to be used. It's grown so much, and I think we've realized that we actually need more support for kids who have been removed and for the families. So yeah, it's not as broken as people would think. One thing that a lot of people don't realize about the foster care system is it's not just about the kids. When the kids get removed and they go to court for the first time, both of the parents get assigned attorneys. The social worker is, bless their hearts, because bless their hearts, because they are there for the family. They're there trying to get mom the help that she needs, dad the help that she needs, all of the kids the case. They're really trying to round up what's going on and find resources for all of them. So when a child gets detained, it's not just about them, but that is the one goal, because we want to protect the child. We don't want the child to be harmed. So that's kind of where my role comes in, and my organization is, we also don't want any child to get lost. So we highly value the work that the social worker is doing and trying to create services for the whole family. But for us, we don't want the child's voice to get lost in what's going on. It was started by a judge, I believe in Oregon or Washington, and he was like, we need people to be a voice for these children. So he was the one that actually created CASA, and it just kind of blew up and became this national program. So we come in and we say, we're here for the child, we're here to advocate for them. We write reports to the judge, kind of giving just what's going on with the kid, and we even have a section in the report that says, like, this is what they say. The kid could want to go back to be with mom, and that's what we say. They could say, I want to take horseback riding lessons, and that's what we say. Like, we sit down with them before we write the report, and we say, to the best that we can. Sometimes if they're younger, they obviously don't talk. So, but it's a really important piece of it, because it helps them not feel lost. We really are just there for the child. So it's really interesting to see how it works. There's a lot of heartbreaking things, like, and a lot of things that you're just like, oh, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Like, foster care is not how a child's supposed to grow up, and it's a very traumatic experience. But being in the courtroom and seeing the work that the attorneys do and the social workers do, they're doing the best that they can with the resources that they have available to them.
When you are looking for kind of families then, for healthy and safe homes to place these kids in, what kind of criteria are you looking at? Like, are you looking for the nuclear husband and wife married home, or like, how does that process work?
The social workers are the ones that are looking at families and criteria of where they're placing children who gets to be a foster parent. So my role as a CASA and the CASA program that's not what we do. But what we do is we come in and we say, is this home good? Is this a good home? We're looking at mom and dad who are trying to get back into the swing of things, and we're looking, do they have what they need? Are they going to be able to care for this child? What we look for, it's called the minimum level of sufficient care, minimum sufficient care. And it's basically, we're not looking for perfect, we're not looking for abundant, we're looking, can you provide on the basic level for this child? Because, again, our goal is always reunification if it can be, if that's the safe option for the child. When I started my job, it was really easy to be like, how could these parents do this? Like, how could these parents get their children taken away from them? And sitting in the courtroom every time I see the parents, and I'm like, oh, you're human. Like, you're a human being. You make mistakes. You don't get it right all of the time. And you love your kids. When we go in as a CASA, we're looking at kind of the same things. Is this a clean house? Is there a roof over their head? Is there food in the pantry? Are they being emotionally taken care of? Because I think we're starting to realize that that's a huge part of resiliency, is the emotional health. Like, yes, they could have food and they could have a roof, but if they don't have emotional stability, it's really hard for them to come back.
I mean, as the advocates who meet with these children, that's got to be so valuable to them to have someone who's constant in their life. like somebody who they can rely on in all of this confusion and feeling like they don't have anyone to rely on.
Yeah. And that's what CASA, when we recruit volunteers, we ask for a big chunk of your time. We ask that you commit to being with the child until their case is closed, which that depends. Again, some of them go years and years. Some of them are done in 6 months. It really depends on the age of the child, the situation that they're coming from. But yeah, some kids, by the time that they leave the foster care system, have had 7 different foster families, 6 different social workers, therapists, teachers. But sometimes it's overwhelming to have all of these people. So the CASA comes in, and that's your person. We really value people who want to stick around and be there, because you never know what's going to happen. Like, social workers change so quickly that there's a story that I hear over and over again about a little boy who I think he broke his leg and went to the doctor, got it all fixed up. Well, the doctor said that he needed to come back for an x-ray the next year to make sure everything was healing okay. Well, by the time that year came around, foster parents had changed, social worker had changed twice. There was a big stack of paperwork, and nobody knew that he needed that x-ray anymore. And the CASA was the only one who knew. So when it came time for the court hearing for the child, the CASA told the judge he needs that x-ray. Like, that was, the doctor said he needed it, and the judge ordered that was done. So then the social worker had to go make sure that appointment was made and the x-ray was taken. So it's, the CASAs are really an important part of the kids' life.
Stability, well-being, yeah, that's huge.
And CASAs are the only people, our program is completely volunteer-based, so CASAs are the only people who are not paid to be in their life, which is also huge for them, because the social worker's paid to be there, the doctor's paid to be there, the attorney's paid to be there. So to have somebody who says, no, I'm choosing to do this for you, it's really powerful. It's a really important thing to them to say, oh, like, you don't have to do this, but you are. And some kids don't understand. They don't understand that, but some kids do. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing about the advocates and their role, and just some of how the foster care system works. Because I know I honestly, I have not known very much about the foster care system until very recently. And it's sort of been a mystery to me, not really understanding what it is. So I want to hear a little bit about the male and female dynamics within the foster care system. Is there a difference in how mothers and fathers get treated, or male versus female children that are in the system? What does that dynamic look like, and how does that play into this whole process of foster care?
I think it's as complex as it can get. That's not
a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, everything about this system is convoluted and complex, and there's moving parts, and there's you're dealing with different people, and then so yeah, there's definitely, I would say, just in most social service fields, you predominantly see women. I don't know if it's because we were raised in this idea of women are the caring, nurturing people, that's what you do, so we're more driven to that. I don't know if it's part of our nature as women to feel more nurturing and caring towards things like this, but I would say we definitely see more women working in this field than men. Not that there isn't. There's quite a few men, and we value them a lot. I can speak to CASA numbers, and we have a lot more women, whether that's because they have more time because they're not primary income drivers in their family. I don't know if it's because they really care and they're very passionate, and that this is how they can be involved. It could be our nature. It could just be the way we were raised. It could be life circumstances and just the idea that men provide income and women stay home with the kids so they have more time. I mean, there's so many different factors that could contribute to that. But I really don't think it's that women care more. I think it's just a lot of these different things playing into why you see that in the foster care system. As far as parents go, I don't want to be harsh, but a lot of the times you just see the mom. Mom has the child, and it's very hard to deny that that's your child when you had it. Mm-hmm. So when you see it, mom is 9 out of 10 times always the one there. We do get dads, and we get good dads, and we get not so good dads. Sometimes we don't know who the dad is. So there's definitely a lot of unbalance there, because choices are made and sometimes you don't know, or there is a part where the judge has to ask, like, and this is always shocking to me because I'm like, we only do this to the mom, but the judge sits the mom down and asks, who's the child's father? Could it be this person? Could it be this person? And asks her a whole list of details about that, which is always, like, at first it was kind of shocking to me because I was like, oh, like, why aren't we asking the dad these questions? But really, you can't deny when it's your child if the child was inside of you. So, yeah, moms typically get more services because they're just there more. Sometimes dads don't even know. Sometimes they do very extensive research into family when the child is detained. So sometimes the dad will find out because the child was removed and then step up to the plate or not. It just depends. So, yeah. As far as the kids go, I was thinking about it this morning, and I was like, I feel like there is a difference between how boys and girls are treated in the foster care system, especially when you get into the teenage years, because there's a lot of stereotypes about the behaviors that you're going to get from teenage boys and teenage girls. Mm-hmm. And when you're working in a field like this, when you're working with children, you have to be hypervigilant about preventing behaviors and preventing harm. When they're a teenager, they can run away and they can make their own choices. And I mean, once they run away, like, you have to call the police and, like, let them know, and call the social worker. Like, there's lots of like protection around them when they do that, but they know how to, and they have friends and they have cell phones. So yeah, it's I sometimes wonder if maybe we didn't let kind of the stereotypical idea of what a foster child is get in the way of who they are. Mm-hmm. If the behaviors would be different, because yeah, I recently was talking to a newer advocate, and she was just like, this is not what I was expecting it to be. Like, this child is happy-go-lucky, really happy, doesn't even seem to be affected. And I was like, good, we're going to keep her that way. Like, that's what we're going to do. And it's, when you work in it so much, you kind of forget that those little innuendos and those little, like, things that you often perceive about the children are there, but then you get reminded that, like, oh, there's people that assume certain things about girls in the foster care system because they're a girl, and the different kinds of things that they can make choices about and get into. So, yeah, I would definitely say there's this tricky balance of how do you protect them the best that they can be protected based off of what you know about them, and also not letting what you know about them on the surface keep you from helping them in the best way possible.
Yeah.
So,
what are some of those assumptions that people have?
They can be really harsh. I mean, it's that teenage girls get pregnant. It's that teenage boys are violent. It just, like, things like that, just those very, like, and it's true, like, teenage boys can't get pregnant. So there's this, and I think that's the same with the parents, is there's this kind of responsibility that falls on the girl because it's her body that's being affected by it. So yeah, just a lot of these, like, you're protective of the girls in a totally different way because of what their bodies do and how they were just built, you know? So, and teenage boys, it's really, really hard to get advocates for the teenage boys because we have predominantly female advocates, and a lot of the times they don't feel safe because the teenage boys are bigger and they're known to be more violent. But not that the girls can't be violent, and not that the boys can't harm their body or get into trouble that way either. Like, the street goes both ways. It's just so different that I think, I mean, this is going into a whole different rabbit hole, but I think sometimes we assume that most of the girls are the ones being sexually abused, when I think that there's probably a really good proportion of the boys that experience that as well. It's just not talked about.
Is that within their foster homes or in their birth homes?
I would say both. I mean, you never want a child to be harmed in a foster home because you remove them from a traumatic experience. So to put them into another one is like, you don't want that to happen. Like, that's how we get kids who don't trust the foster care system. But again, going back to what I said earlier about, you're looking at this family that says they want to take care of kids, and you're desperate for people because you have too many kids and not enough people ready to take care of them. So sometimes you're like, this is a slight red flag, but we're gonna hope that it doesn't turn out to be anything. And you go with it, and sometimes it's not good. And that's the hard, and that's, again, social workers, that they carry that on their backs. They are making the decisions. I mean, the judge is the one who ultimately makes the decision about the child going home or not, but the social worker is the one on the ground with their eyes in the home. So yeah, it's tough, but I would say when it comes to sexual abuse, I think it's probably happening more to the boys than we realize. But it's just not talked about.
That's so.
I feel like if you're putting the expectation on these kids to be bad, like, they're gonna fall into that. You know. Like, it's setting them up for failure rather than success. If you bring all of those expectations into working with the foster care system and everything, because that just perpetuates it.
And there's like a pattern of distrust that we're seeing too, sort of grows. First of all, there's a traumatic experience at home. You're pulled from your home and put into another one, and then
which is more trauma.
Which is, it's just traumatic in and of itself, whether or not the parents are loving or not. And then so these foster parents, then there's potential for a greater distrust and loss of trust in the social worker for putting them there. And then so the next time it comes around, maybe they do land in a good family, and how are they supposed to believe that it's going to be a safe space for them? So they're going to act out, and they're going to not walk in, just believing that everything's going to work out, which can make it difficult. So it feels like just sort of spirals.
And these kids might not necessarily have the coping skills that other kids do.
Well,
and so,
who did?
Right. Like, I was...
You're also going through puberty. You're also
you got a little bit going on. And it's just kind of... It's all around, like, impossible situations, doing the best you can with what you have and hoping for the best outcome. But I think what's important to remember is, like, everyone's genuinely trying to do their best. And you touched on that. Like, originally when you came in, you were like, how can these parents, like... But then it's like, oh, they're just human. Like, we're all human, trying to fix a mess together and just praying it all works out, which is, I would imagine, takes a very heavy emotional and mental toll. So I would really love to know, like, how do you take care of yourself as a person in a field that is very challenging while you're trying to help other people? Because I'd imagine if you're not at your best, you're not gonna be able to fully serve what you need to.
Sometimes I don't take care of myself well. Sometimes it's really hard, especially when you're working with kids, because you want to give them everything. You want to give them all of you. But I think for me, one, I have to remind myself that it's my job, and I have to do my very best while I'm on the clock and being there, being present. And then when I close my computer for the day, when I leave work, that's when I have to remind myself, if I'm going to show up tomorrow and I'm going to be the best that I can be tomorrow when I'm expected to be there, it's time for me to like do what I need to do to be okay. I mean, self-care looks different for everybody. Everybody gets rejuvenated by different things. But I think the biggest thing is reminding myself that like that if I'm not doing good, I'm not going to be at my best for these kids and for the advocates, because there's this kind of tiered thing where I oversee advocates and then they go see their kids. So if I'm not in a place when an advocate calls me with an emergency and they're saying this thing, so if I'm not in a good place and they're calling me, I'm not ready to help them navigate that. So I'm not perfect at it. I'm not great, but reading books that I enjoy, like finding that book that I kind of always love to read. So that thing that removes me from the real world for a second and I get to imagine a totally different thing. And also I would say learning is a really good form of self-care, because when you are learning about trauma, you learn how to navigate it. If you don't know anything about trauma, then you can't possibly get better or be your best self,
sort of
because
happens to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't help other people if you don't know. So that's kind of something that you have to do in small bites. But for me, that's so helpful to learn about how do I deal with trauma, because once I understand it for myself, I can help other people. There's been a lot of research. I mean, I think it's just been mental health and trauma and things have really been growing over the last few years. And Nadine Burke-Harris has done a lot of research into adverse childhood experiences and how trauma affects the brain. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score that talks about
so good
the kind of interwoven way. And I think sometimes we totally separate our mind from our bodies.
Yeah.
We don't realize that what we do to our body affects our mind, and what we're doing with our mind is affecting our body.
Yep.
So reading that book totally changed my perspective on, like I have to take care of my mind because it's actually going to hurt my body. And there's such that balance of being healthy mentally and physically. So I think it just depends for every person. But find those things that make you happy and admit that they make you happy and pursue them, because and I think that's just, I think about people in my life that I see pursuing things that they love, and it motivates me to do the best that I can in the things that I love. So taking care of yourself is honestly probably one of the best kind of reflections you can give.
Absolutely.
I wondered, you have sort of this very intense emotional workplace. I was on the missions field for 2 years, and I saw this in where I was in my own self. I got very burnt out, and I see it in a lot of people who kind of pursue these sort of work environments. And I wondered, is burnout like a common thing? So there's an aspect of taking care of yourself at home and like your emotional and physical well-being, but then there's also this other side of like professional boundaries in the workplace. How do you navigate that?
Ooh, that's a great question, because there is that fine line of what I do is mostly confidential, so I can't talk about my cases with anybody that I don't work with. So there's that fine line of I need my coworkers and my supervisors, because they are my emotional, when I just need to get it out, they are my people. But also they're my coworkers, and I mean, anybody who's worked in a professional setting knows that there's good boundaries. Like, you can be friends with coworkers, but there's boundaries that you have to have. So, but yeah, I would say burnout, especially in this field, compassion fatigue is huge, which is just kind of that, like, I'm so tired. Like, I just am so tired. And I was reading about it, and I was reading that it's actually, compassion fatigue is a symptom of secondary post-traumatic stress.
Wow.
So when you're reading case files about children who are being abused, when you're reading texts from your my advocates talking about the situations that they're dealing with. When I'm reading, like I said, I do the continuing education, so I'm always watching videos and reading books about foster care. It comes to this point where I'm like, I am tired. So they're just, you have to know yourself, and you have to know your limits. Boundaries is a great book if you don't know.
Oh, Henry Cloud?
Yes. But knowing what gets to come, these are my boundaries, what gets to come in, what has to stay out, what things are kind of, that boundary can move depending on where I'm at. If I'm in a good place, I can totally take on more things. If I'm not in a good place, that boundary stays up and nothing comes in. So yeah, it's having that relationship with your coworkers where you can go into their office and cry because you've had a really bad day and you read this really hard thing. But also having those people outside of work who know your heart and know the way you function, and getting to release on them too.
So I want to kind of backtrack a little bit into something that you were talking about just now, which is this idea that women are more nurturing to work within the foster care system, and I think that this idea of women being in nurturing roles is something that has been very present throughout the history of women working. I mean, when I think about reading about when women first started to be able to sort of leave the home, they were relegated to jobs like teaching or childcare. And those are great jobs and really important jobs, but it was like, oh, this is what the women do, and this is also not worth being paid as much as what the men do. So I sort of wonder...
Well, even in the church, too. Like, here's a leadership position. Go do the nursery.
Go teach
children's church. Yes.
Yeah.
Do the kids' choir.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I wonder if that's why we see now social workers and nonprofits are being paid less. Even men within those positions are being paid less because this has been seen as a woman's role, you know?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that it's kind of, and it goes kind of back to what I was saying about this idea that I think we've had for a really long time of men bring in the income for the family. Women stay home, they take care of the kids, they clean the house. And I mean, if you choose to do that, that's your choice, but we have transitioned into this society where single income families just don't really work anymore. It's very hard to live a comfortable middle class life off of a single income. So now women are having to go get jobs, but they're still kind of in that you can have a job, but you can be a teacher. Teachers don't get paid great. You can be a social worker. You can do the kind of things that we've been told our whole lives that we're supposed to do, which is this nurturing, caring, which I don't think that it's nurturing and caring is regulated just to women.
Yes.
Men can be just as nurturing and caring.
Yeah. And women can be not.
Women can be fiery and spicy. And honestly, in my field, fiery and spicy is good. Like, you don't just have to be this soft, loving, stay-at-home mom to be a social worker. I mean, obviously, if you're a social worker, it's your job. But to be an advocate, to be in this field, like, you have to have some fire in you. You're talking about, you're sitting in a room and you're facing really prestigious attorneys and a judge and their parents, and you have to be ready to say, no, like, this child needs this, even if it goes against what the parents want. Sometimes you have to go against what the child wants. Sometimes Bobby wants to go back with mom, and he says, I want to be back with mom, and everything you see says that is not a good idea. So you have to be ready to say, this child is important to me, and I'm going against everything that he wants and everything that his mom wants to say that can't happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's kind of this vortex that we get into of women are in this job because it's what the nurturing, gentle woman would do.
Well, and sometimes I feel like the word nurturing, it feels like it's meant to be a compliment, in that, like, oh, you have this beautiful quality about you. But I often feel like it's very patronizing in the idea that, okay, you're nurturing, so go do that nurturing thing that you do over there.
Yeah.
Like,
just go sit in your corner.
Yeah, go sit in your corner. And that doesn't mean that we can't celebrate, like, the nurturing aspects of women. But like you said, men can be nurturing and need to be nurturing. Please, God, men,
Yes.
you are nurturing beings, and you have a
Yes.
responsibility to be nurturing, just like we do,
Yes.
especially in parenting. And we need more men to step up into those roles.
Yeah.
And the pay should reflect the quality of the work, the education that goes into it, and all of the things that a social worker has to prepare for, and an attorney has, like, it's not an easy field to get into.
Yeah. And as a social worker too, you're going into houses that are not great. You're being exposed, like I was talking about that secondary post-traumatic stress. You're being exposed to that, but you're not getting paid enough to go get a good counselor. Like, you're not getting paid enough to take care of I mean, if you read The Body Keeps the Score, it talks about the ways that the stress actually affects your body. So you may potentially have more medical needs. And I mean, you're working for the county most often, so you're getting medical care, but there's still a lot of money that you have to put into maintaining your well-being.
Well, and not to mention, like, God forbid, it's a dangerous situation, but you could potentially even be putting yourself at risk for the child.
100%, yeah. I mean, and our advocates, we say, like, if you're in danger, leave. Like, that's we want to protect you at all costs, because that's my job, is to protect my advocates. But the social workers, their job is to be in those situations. And more often than not, they're not these super dangerous situations. But parents, when it comes to their kids, they get protective. They get defensive. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that gives me hope for some of these parents, is I'm like, you're angry right now, and you should be. Like, this is good. I think that we sometimes care about things in society more than we care about the kids that are going to be growing into these things. And if we would just recognize the value of preventing trauma in these children and dealing with the trauma that they have, it would change the world. I mean, how many, I don't personally know the statistics off the top of my head of how many kids are in the foster care system, but in Shasta County, I think we have between 500 and 600 kids. So think about, if you're taking care of every one of those kids and they grow up in this community. I mean, community development is like a huge piece of what I love. And we're looking at these kids who are going to live here, are going to get jobs here. We want them to do the best that they can, like, for themselves, for our community, for their children. So,
because we're building the future members of society.
Exactly.
And the trauma that they go through and the pain that they have to experience, that's going to come with them into adulthood. And that's going to affect us and them, and, like, their future generations and how they grow up.
And the statistics, if you've been in the foster care system, the chances of your children going into foster care skyrocket. It's heartbreaking, because and a lot of these parents who have been in the foster care system, that is the last thing that they want. But because they've already experienced it, it happens, because they haven't been given what they need. And we're doing the best that we can. I mean, bills have been passed. In 2012, a bill was passed that actually extended foster care benefits for kids, so they can choose to stay in foster care from 18 to 22.
That's amazing.
And it's not normal foster care. It's called independent living. So they get put into a mentor house or an apartment. They learn to pay bills. It's kind of this, okay, we're going to help you transition into adulthood.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's not the same. It's not easy. I mean, anybody transitioning into adulthood can say it's really hard. So imagine doing that by yourself.
When you're just a regular kid, you know?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So yeah, I think that definitely we've seen the foster care system. And I feel like it's important to note that we've seen women shape social services in the foster care system. What it is today is what it is because of the heavy influences that women have had on it. And I think that's amazing. But also, going back to those biases, we're like, oh, women don't need the income because they're going to have a husband. And as a single person working in the social service field, I'm supporting myself. So it's like, and I know a lot of other people that are too. And actually, that's not fair to assume that just because you're a social worker doesn't mean you don't need the income, because it's your ministry, or it's your calling. So you should sacrifice that paycheck. And I would much rather be in a situation where I'm not getting paid as much and actually feeling like I'm doing something and making a difference. But
you shouldn't have to choose between those things.
Right. Yep.
This work should be recognized as important enough to be paid.
Well, it seems that the way of thinking should not be, here's an important, wonderful thing that you get to do, but you'll have to sacrifice the pay. It should be, here's an important, wonderful thing that we have, and we're going to pay you to back up the need. And I feel the same with teachers and other major care workers in our society. Is like we're kind of like, okay, we're gonna both have you sacrifice yourself in this job for other people, and then you're also gonna have to sacrifice the paycheck. And usually these fields are female dominated.
So you can't deny that there's probably a correlation there, and I think it's important to recognize that. But I do have to say, these women have, and I don't want to, there's a lot of men who have done a lot of great things too, but women have dominated this field for so long and done it so well under the circumstances of the reality that when you work in social services, or you're a teacher or anything else, you're not getting paid great, and they've done a great job. And I think that's worth recognition of a thank you for everything that you've done and sacrificed.
Thank you, Chloe.
For real.
I mean, but,
Yeah, I mean, and I think, here's the thing, is if this was a high-paying job, then I am almost sure you would see more men in it.
Definitely.
And you would see this diversification, which is probably needed because it's so valuable to have both men and women in these positions to care for different kids that have different needs.
Absolutely. I mean, children with trauma and need to see good, strong, manly figures just as much as they need to see good, strong female figures. Male, like a boy or a girl, seeing a good, strong male figure is so important. There's work to be done. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect system, but being in it every day, I'm like, wow, I'm amazed by the work that's being done under the circumstances that you have to do them.
It's really hard to look in and see all the pain, and like we've sort of alluded to, there is a lot of pain. People come through the foster care system very traumatized. But what for you keeps you in the job? What are the beautiful things about the job that make it worth your while?
Oh, goodness. I mean, knowing that I go to work every day and I am giving a mom and a dad and a child an opportunity to be a family. I think we all long for that loving acceptance. We all long to belong somewhere. And knowing that when I wake up and I start my day, I'm playing a very small part of that. And I think when it comes to foster care, there's so many different pieces that have to fall into place for children to go home or to be in a position that is going to benefit them. And to know that I can be one of those pieces is really important. My job is overseeing volunteers, but I, in my own time, also volunteer with 2 sisters that are in the foster care system. And even that, I mean, has been life-changing to me to see their resilience and their life and their trust, and just getting to know them like they're my little buddy, like they're my friends. And knowing that maybe we won't always be in contact, but one day they're going to look back on this time and they're going to remember that person that showed up every week and that person that brought them their favorite Dutch. And and even if they never know what was in the court reports, they're going to know that I was there for them. And I think that is why I love CASA so much, is we provide people who care so deeply and who are so consistent to these kids. And sometimes they don't want it. Sometimes the kids are so broken. I mean, they're not broken. I hate saying that because they're perfect. But sometimes they're so hurt from the system and from their own trauma that they see another person and they say, we don't want this. And sometimes that person's like, well, I'm going to keep showing up. So, and sometimes we don't. We like to respect what they want. Sometimes we don't do that. But sometimes it's a test. Sometimes it's them saying, are you really here to stick around? So knowing that I get to be a part of that, it's what gives me life, and it's what gets me through the fatigue and the sadness, and it's what makes caring. I was talking to my boss the other day, and she was like, I feel like I have a backpack on, and every time I read one of these court reports, someone puts a little rock in the backpack. And at first it doesn't seem like a very big deal, but after you've worked in this field for so many years, you now have a backpack that weighs hundreds of pounds on your back. And I think that it's worth it for these kids to fight for them. It makes it worth it.
Yeah, you know, that's Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are showing them God.
And CASA is not a religious affiliate, like, it's not religious at all, but as a Christ follower, I think that's another big part of it is I want to be like Jesus, because that's part of who I am. I'm deeply loved by Jesus, and that has changed my life. So knowing that I'm so deeply loved, I want these kids to know that they're just as deeply loved, and that's showing up in the way that I show up. So you don't have to be a religious affiliation. You don't even have to be a Christian to show up and do this, but I love enabling people to love people as deeply as I know Jesus loves them. You know.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. It actually reminds me, I was spending time with the Lord once, and he was wearing a huge backpack, like a camping backpack that was piled with stuff, and it was huge. And I was like, "Why are you wearing that? Like, where are you going? What are you doing?" And he was like, these are all the things that you can put onto me, and to me this looks heavy and this looks big, but actually it's light. And obviously, you guys working in this system, you don't have necessarily the privilege of it being light, but like you are being a reflection of a savior, and for those kids who are so hurt and who have been so traumatized and who have gone through more than a lot of adults have gone through, for them to get to have someone who's doing that for them is just invaluable, you know.
Yeah.
So.
It is. I think about one of my little girls, and when I ask her, who do you want to see? Who do you love? And she always says, my mom. Like, I want to see my mom. And it breaks my heart that she doesn't get to do that. And her experience of love is not what it should be. So getting to show up and say, you are deeply loved, and we're here for it, we're fighting for it. It's amazing, and it's a privilege for me, it's a privilege to carry those rocks for them. It is. It's hard, and it makes me tired, and sometimes I cry about it, but it is a privilege because it's what I was made to do.
Yeah.
So.
And criticisms about the foster care system aside, there are people who are actively caring for kids who have been abused and put in very dangerous situations and have been neglected and unseen. It matters that as a society we stand up and we say, no, you know, you deserve better, and we're going to provide that no matter how painful it is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the hard thing to grasp, is that sometimes it's hard to receive that help.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. Wow. So, after all this beautiful, amazing stuff, I would love to know from you, Chloe, what does woman being mean to you? It's different for everyone. Everyone has their own interpretation. But, I mean, with you doing such radically brave, amazing work, I would love to hear what your interpretation of that is.
I think being a woman being is knowing what you're worth. It's knowing that you're capable of being strong and tender. It's knowing that you're capable of sitting down with somebody and letting them cry and then getting up and fighting for them. It's knowing that you're deeply loved. It's knowing who you are. I think sometimes being a woman, you face a lot of, we're in a time of a lot of different opinions and women changing the world and changing the way women are perceived, and sometimes it's like, what am I? And I think you're you, like you get to know who you are aside from anything else that may have been put on you. You get to make those choices, and you're capable of making those choices for yourself. It's strong, it's capable, she's all of the things that we've talked about today. She's loving.
She's loving too.
She's loving, she's nurturing, she's fierce, she's fire. She doesn't have to choose between those things. She can be whatever she wants to be.
So good. That was fire right there. Just drop some knowledge, man. So, resources then for people who are interested in learning more, digging deeper. What would you recommend?
I think that there's a lot of things I would recommend, but I mentioned The Body Keeps the Score. It's not specifically towards foster care, but I think it touches on, if you kind of want to understand a little bit about trauma and how that affects these kids, that's a great resource. There's lots of documentaries. There's a documentary called The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez on Netflix, and it's a really hard watch, but it's really eye-opening to the system. There's a documentary called Foster that follows a couple of kids through the foster care system, reading up on adverse childhood experiences, and the work that Nadine Burke-Harris is doing. That's really to all children, but definitely touches on some of the things that these kids have experienced. And I think just being well-rounded, like those things will give you a well-rounded experience of what's the foster care system like and how do I respond. So
it's amazing.
Yeah.
So I would love to know, Chloe, as we're closing, what is the one thing you would want the world to know about the foster care system? And then where can people get involved and stay connected? I mean, really just plug away, whatever your heart desires.
I love plugs. I think that it's important to remember that there is no wrong time, wrong way to get involved. You can be a foster parent. You can be a respite parent who is somebody who takes the kids on the weekends when the foster parent needs to go out of town. I'm going to plug CASA. You can be an advocate, which is a couple hours a week. Getting involved, it doesn't have to be this big daunting, I have to take this child into my home in order for that to help. Get involved with after school programs that help kids with homework. Get involved, get your hands in, just do something, because those things change lives. And yeah, if you want to get involved, I mean, CASA is a nationwide program, so you can literally Google CASA and the county that you're in and reach out to them. If you're in Shasta County, you would be in contact with me. You would go to nvcss.org/CASA, and then you would inquire there, and we would reach out and give you more information. And I love talking about it. It's something that I could talk about all day, so just give me a call.
We can tell you really care deeply. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
Very
do.
inspiring.
And where can people find you?
Oh, I'm on Instagram. Chloe.
Instagram.
Chloe May Lynch. On Instagram.
Well, thank you so much, Chloe, for your time today. We really appreciate, one, hearing your heart and just all the insights you provided. I hope the audience feels as inspired as I know we three do. So yeah, with all that, we're going to wrap up today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for joining us and being with us. You can always follow us on Instagram, Woman Being Podcast, and our website is womanbeingcommunity.com. All right. See you later.
Like, subscribe, share.
Do it.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends. Tell your grandma.
Tell your mom.
Tell your
Yeah.
dog.
Tell your mom, your sister, and your brother.
Call your dad.
And your dad.
Yeah. Everyone.
Thank you.